there in podcast world. I hope you're having a great day. You're listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast, the podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Today, we have a really exciting episode. This is going to be a little different than our normal recordings because we normally are pretty high level. We'll just like do a 10,000 foot view on most things that we're doing. This episode, we're going to dive deep, and we're going to dive deep into some of the chemical compositions and the actual science behind indoor air quality. Right now is a scary time for a lot of people, and there are also some people who are being misunderstood, some people who can potentially take advantage of you as a consumer. Business owners may be ignorant and accidentally take advantage of you, may tell you information that's not true. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring on two guys that are experts in the industry. One of them is Colby Simmons. Colby Simmons, screw that up, get all tongue tied. He's a Purple Heart vet with the Army. He's a soldier, and he is currently an HVAC and building science service expert, and is really good when it comes to the science behind indoor air quality, the products, and has a background from LSU. His whole family, his wife's from went to LSU. They're engineer backgrounds. Very, very smart people. And then secondly on here is Chris Hughes. He is the SOB of Hughes Mechanical. So he was actually we interviewed together at the AHR Expo also. So I'm 90% sure that episode has already been released. If not, it'll be released here in the next week, maybe. Chris is telling me no, it hasn't been released. Yeah, we recorded so many of those that day. We've been trying to put them out as much as possible, but yeah, so we'll release that episode too. So that was a really cool episode where we had some bantering going back and forth, where we were trying to, I don't know, explain culture. And I think right now I could say I probably have a one-up on Chris because we're 100% remote. So we don't have to deal with anything like office staff getting sick with each other and everything else. So no, I'm just kidding with Chris. But before we get started, I'm going to tell you that this episode we're going to try and keep it brief. We're going to try and keep it 30 minutes or so. But it's a very interesting topic. It's a very deep topic and controversial topic. And if you want to learn more, if you want to dive deeper, join the Facebook group. It's called the HVAC Grapevine. And it's like a judgment-free zone where they just really want to get to the bottom of the entire problem or question or conflict, rather than just creating a lot of opinions. It's where you go and actually get some science behind the data and dive really deep. And so if you find interest in this topic, if you find interest in indoor air quality, if you find interest in building science, Chris is always putting out some really cool stuff. You'll meet a guy named Leaf. He's a super smart engineer that is friends with Chris, and I think friends with Colby too. But I met him at AHR. Super smart guy, a great personality once he comes out of his shell. But just people like that are really, really cool people that you may not interact with if you don't join that group, because these guys are next level. They're not going to be the ones that are going to be in your like HVAC business owner and managers group. These are definitely guys that are interested in building science and making the most of everything they can. But anyways, if anybody has any questions, once we get started with any of this stuff, reach out to me, tersh@serviceemperor.com. And if you're in Savannah, I can come and walk through things. I can walk you through any of the stuff, and also join that Facebook group if you want to dive deeper. But with that being said, I'd like to first introduce Chris or have Chris introduce himself and go through a brief intro, and then we'll move on to Kobe. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tersh, thanks for having us. Man, I appreciate it. Appreciate the shout out. Like I said, judgment-free zone is strictly a place where everybody can dive deep and keep it civil. That was the whole idea behind it. Was just a place you could go and dive as deep as you want, and without people just bantering you.
It saying that is really funny because when we were at AHR, we all got this house together. You actually, I think you started it, didn't you?
Yeah, I booked a house. My wife was not very happy. I think the house cost me about $5,000.
Yeah, but it was awesome because we had
I
so many people there.
Well, I told my wife, I said, generally speaking, every HVAC technician that I've grew up with and known, they're very ethical people. I said, and they're dying to go to this.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I know if I booked this house that they would jump on board immediately. I said, I'll fill this house in a week. I literally, I booked the house, and within less than 48 hours, the house was full, and I was having to tell people no.
Yeah. I think Nate or somebody was like, "Hey, you want to stay in this house?" I was like, "Yeah." I don't know half the guys, but
Nate Adams hooked me up pretty big. Nate was like, he spreaded the word. I mean, people were just in there. They were like, "Oh, totally, I'm in." So big shout out to Nate Adams on that one.
Yeah, but what I was getting at with the house is like each night when we get back from AHR, or we were at Brian Orr's the school, the symposium for the HVAC symposium. When we came back to the house afterwards, it was just like a huge mastermind group where we were just like bouncing ideas off each other till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, which was freaking awesome. And it was like Bill Spohn, like Nate Adams, like Leaf was there, you were
Michael
there, and
J. House.
yeah, House was there, and like
me and House didn't go to sleep till probably 3 a.m. every night.
Yeah, and it was really cool. But this group, the HVAC Grapevine, it is like all those guys are in there, and it's
fun, man.
It is. It was really cool because like as anybody that's listening to this show, watching this video, they know that I'm the business person, like I'm business minded, and to be surrounded by that group of people, that was really a next level experience for me. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but tell me about you and your background.
Sorry, man. I'm actually big shout out to my father, who's actually paying me and Colby's salaries to get on the computer, and we're crashing his house right now, and his little Disney World clock is going off.
There you go.
So
shout out to Disney. I think they're shut down right now.
So I guess about me, officially got into the trade right after high school, 03. So I'm about 17 years HVAC. Was mainly commercial, rode my dad's footsteps the whole way. That's what I've been doing. Learned from him. And as the guys that like Colby on here joined the team, it was so fun because our team is so diverse with such intelligent guys. They would question everything we did. Like we'd say, well, this is how it is. And they'd be like, is that how it should be? And they're like, because I've read online that should be done differently. So it was culture shock, like it was my opinion to everybody would be this. If you know a guy who you want to bring on board to like an HVAC company and he doesn't come from an HVAC background, but he's a smart guy and he loves to read and research and dive deep, bring that guy on immediately because he's going to change your game. And
cool.
And I have a bunch of guys who've done that.
Sweet. So that kind of leads into Colby. So would you mind giving your background and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, not a problem at all. Colby Simmons, HVAC mechanic, technician, building specialist inside of Hughes Mechanical. So where to start on the diverse background? Everything from warehouse employee to inside of the Army working on UAVs for 6 years. Mm-hmm. Went through, got out, did contractor work, doing 3G technology for biometric scanners.
Oh wow.
After that, came back to Louisiana again and went to LSU for another 3 years. Everything's going good through it, but thanks to the Purple Heart and everything else, traumatic brain injury and PTSD, as soon as I got into small groups with 19 and 20-year-olds,
didn't work out so well.
no, it couldn't do it. So me and the wife decided we were going to get out at that point. And as soon as Chris heard about it, he was like, "Yeah, man, come join up with us." I was like, "Dude, I don't do air conditioning work." He's like, "Yeah, but you know things." I was like,
"Yeah,
okay, like let's give it a go. Like let's do a couple of trial runs." And thanks to just a diverse background and everything else, like it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's been a good learning, and thanks to going through all the different chemistries and maths and sciences, like I understand a lot more of the science behind this stuff, which is pretty interesting.
It is really cool because a lot of people, they don't, they learn, it takes a long time to learn because they don't know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because they're being told. So they have to memorize the process. Whereas you understand the why behind it. So it I'm sure it makes things click a lot better.
Yeah, being able to go through and whenever they're saying, "Oh, well, this is what your subheat and your supercool is," and just like, yeah, no, it's like, don't get those mixed up if you're on the liquid line of suction. I'm like, yeah, no, it's pretty obvious on the liquid line. That's where your subcool is gonna I don't.
Right.
So that's always a fun thing to get into.
So, just to kind of for example, because this was a fun one that recently happened, we were asked by a building that was a museum building that was relocated, and it was next level, man. They wanted to keep everything to perfect humidity, this, that, and the other, and because all these artifacts were in there.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, and so I just literally, I don't know, I was intimidated, so I just passed it over to Colby, and I was like, "Hey, Colby, like, this has got your name all over it." And Colby's like, "Okay." He's like, "I'll take it." And I mean, literally, Colby comes back to me in 24 hours. He goes, "Okay, here's what we can do." He gives me a total business plan on like a quote on how we could do it. And then I said, "Okay, what's the drawback?" He goes, "The one drawback I have that in certain scenarios, though single pane windows could sweat." And I'm like, wow, I never would have thought about that. You know what I'm saying? It was just,
I think you told me about that story at AHR. I didn't realize that was this Colby that you were talking about.
Cool. Yeah. So
it's good to meet you, Colby.
It's a pleasure to be on, Tersh. Yeah, I'm glad to be able to help out. And
so I'm going to start off with a couple questions. I have a list of them here, and if we have time, we'll go through them. If we start to dive too deep, we may have to cut some of them off. But getting started, could you tell me, like, what exactly is a virus and how does it live?
Let me get my background light back on. So a virus is essentially just a single-celled organism that requires to have a host in order for it to reproduce. Like it can't live it can't reproduce unless it's inside of a host.
Okay.
So that's the very condensed version of this. A lot of times it'll have a protein coat that's on it, or it'll be lipid encapsulated with little protein off hangers to it that whenever it goes to it actually makes contact with something that is, that it can actually inject itself into, it will do that. So that's how it can go through and replicate, whether it's through DNA sequencing or RNA sequencing and single strand versus double strand.
So
that part matters. It's a single little thing that just hangs out, and it waits to be able to get in contact with something that it can reproduce with, whether that's inside of your lungs or inside of your eyes, your nose, wherever it is.
So does that coating on it, does it go away whenever it's inside, once it gets inside the host? Like if you breathe it in, does that protein shell, does that go away or does that stay on it?
So as soon as it goes through and ejects, so it just holds its RNA to be able to go through and shoot down into your cells
Uh-huh.
so that it can sequence itself, so it can create thousands of others of itself. But it
Okay.
just does that one time, and then that protein shell just falls apart and gets absorbed into your body, which that part isn't harmful.
Okay.
It's just that RNA sequence that goes through and is
So whenever
bad.
you get the flu, does it just take one of those single cell organisms, or does it take several of them before you actually catch the flu, quote unquote, catch the flu?
Technically, it only takes one.
Okay.
That's, just because
Usually
if you go through and you create one,
Uh-huh.
then it will create 1,000 more, and then
Okay.
those 1,000 will create 1,000, and then we get into the Wayne's World scenario of, you tell two friends, they tell two friends. It's exponential growth.
I like that analogy. Cool. So this air cleaning technology can produce PCO, or photocatalytic oxidation. And it's to my understanding that this process creates a harmful chemical that you'll breathe in when this technology is put into use in the indoor living space. Is that correct? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Could you explain what PCO is specifically when it comes to formaldehyde? Because that the chemical that we all hear about is formaldehyde, and that's what, when people are naysayers, that's what I hear is it creates formaldehyde. We had like the formaldehyde scare in the sheetrock that came from China, and until you brought in fresh air, like the houses would just stink all the high heaven. Can you explain that? Can you break that down a little bit for me?
Yeah, so with a lot of your building materials, that's where formaldehyde will come from inside of your house. That's where it is just generally released at, is inside of your house. So the idea of bringing in fresh air whenever you have a large amount of that formaldehyde in there is going to help with the dilution of it, which is great. I would never tell you that you do not need to bring in fresh air unless you are next to Exxon, like some of us here are.
Yeah.
Don't bring in fresh air here. Just clean
Gotcha.
that stuff and seal your stuff up tight, and maybe import fresh air from somewhere else.
Yes.
But
So
as far as this,
PCOs. Okay.
yeah, the PCOs, the photocatalytic oxidizers.
Uh-huh.
So generally that's just going through, and you will have a UV lamp that is coated with some sort of a catalyst. That's
Okay.
the photocatalyst for it, is the coating on that UV light.
Can you give an example of which ones that might be? Do you know right off the top of your head? I mean, it's not weird. I don't want to pick apart one brand, but I just want to be, so when people hear it and they can familiarize themselves with that style of piece of equipment.
Yeah, no, and the ones that I know the most about is the one that I have in my house. It's my air scrubber. So
Okay.
I went through and I did the initial science behind it and saw that it was doing, it goes through, it creates small amounts of ozone. It goes through, it creates, these hydrogen peroxides. It creates this hydroxyls. It does all these fun things. Like, okay, well, yeah, let's put it inside the house. Let's give it a try. I've got a house that previously was owned by people that loved curry.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
cigarettes. So my house was,
that smell.
Yeah, it was inundated with my house. We had it painted, and it was still there inside of the house, as well as I've got a cat and a large dog, and my mother is very allergic to these things. So that was a real issue for me. So went through, got it put in, got it installed, and then I started to go through and dig into a little more of the research behind it. And as soon as I started to see some of these things get pointed out, I got a little scared also. I mean,
Right.
I understand the things behind this. Whenever somebody says that it creates formaldehyde inside of your house, I get worried. Whenever I hear that, ozone is one of the top things that people test for as far as indoor pollutants, I get a little worried. I had a very small, less than a 1-year-old baby at this point. So I went through, unplugged it, spent about a week going through doing some research, plugged it back in. Like that's
because ozone is obviously not good, and I mean in large quantities. I know of some people who have put ozone generators in their house, And like I would walk into the house and like almost instantly get a headache, and it was like, all right, I got to get out of here. And so whether science or not, like I had like personal experience, I know that the ozone affected me adversely. Um, so when something like this says it generates ozone, like how do you measure what is good and what's bad, a safe amount of ozone, and when it's acceptable to have ozone in the house?
So generally, whenever you're looking at ozone, if you have somebody that can go through and do your IEQ for you and pull all the measurements for it, you're looking for less than 100 parts per billion of this. That's generally what OSHA considers to be, I think it's their 8-hour safety time.
Okay.
So, but if you get to that level, that's safe for 8 hours. You're going to be in there for a whole lot longer. That's why I don't like to have ozone generators inside of rooms that are going to be occupied within the next hour after you turn them off.
Okay.
Also, the things that's going to go through and so creating the ozone is one thing, but then its actual degradation rate is going to be different depending on if you have carpet in your rooms, if you have furniture, if there's going to be kids inside the room. Ozone is most frequently picked up between the ages, I think, of 10 and 15, and primarily amongst women.
Yeah,
like
I did hear that. I did.
Their lungs the most for it. You know, it can cause all sorts of different issues for it. And some people are allergic to ozone. If you have headaches with that, you might be one of the people that are more susceptible to that. It might be one of those things, which is a thing that you would now be able to know. Hey, if I'm going to go through and get an air scrubber or something like that, make sure I get one that does not generate ozone, which is something that I would generally just go through and suggest for people that do have smaller houses, that don't have carpet, that don't have a large amount of furniture, that don't have high ceilings, that that don't have these things what are considered to be the ozone sinks, which is just where they kind of just get absorbed into.
Okay, so if they have hardwood floors and a smaller house, and then just a standard 8-foot ceilings, then you would say let's stay away from anything that would generate even a small amount of ozone.
It sounds like you're saying ozone is not safe in a tiny home.
Oh yeah, good point. So if you have a tiny home, or if you're part of this tiny home project stuff that's going on, you would want to stay away from this product.
I would stay away from this product unless you were able to go through and put in controls so that it would only activate during times that you had that house unoccupied.
Okay. Which is doable, but if you don't know what you're doing, like if you're just buying one off the shelf and throwing it in, it's not going to have those relays and stuff set up in place already.
Correct. And that's all part of it. Is if the homeowner is going to go through and put these things in there, do all of your research. If you're going to go through and contact a credible, like a well-established HVAC company, then they should ask you questions before you go through and get this installed. If you say, hey, I want to get an air scrubber installed, and they're like, Roger that, it's going to be
right, whatever amount
$1,500 and we'll be there tomorrow. It's like, hold on. It should say, well, let's start off with, do you have any allergies that you're trying to mitigate, to deal with? Like, what are the things? Because there are certain things that ozone will go through and do, because air scrubber does have one that creates ozone, one that does not create ozone. As a matter of fact, the one that does not create ozone actually eliminates more ozone inside of your house.
Okay.
So if you're very worried about ozone creation, you have those smaller houses, then that secondary one will benefit you even more.
Oh, okay.
Colby, why would you even want to have an ozone generating device in your house, period? Why, if the other cleaning agents that get created from the catalyst and everything, the PCO device and all that, what's the point in even dealing with ozone and even having that worry?
So the two ways that these indoor air scrubbers go through and work is, one is by going through and creating these hydroxyl radicals that will, they create the hydroxyl radicals. They create the superoxides, they create a gaseous version of hydrogen peroxide, and all those things have a very short half-life to them. They're very reactive. They'll go through, they don't generally get to travel too terribly far, especially these hydroxyl radicals, which are a million times more reactive than ozone is. But with that, you're not getting the same, it's not going to get the same house coverage for you if you do that. So if
when you say it doesn't travel very far, are you saying it's like from your supply plenum, it might make it down the ductwork, or it's going to shoot out your supply grill, but it might only go 10 foot?
As far as these hydroxyl radicals, if it leaves it's probably not even going to make it outside of where the actual air scrubber is. And this air scrubber is like this wide.
Oh, okay.
Like,
so it's going to be small area.
It is crazy reactive. It destroys whatever is inside of there as far as those things. You can get secondary hydroxyl radicals that will be created further on down the line thanks to the hydrogen peroxide degradation and all these different little things for it. But generally, you're mainly going to get that large concentration of those hydroxyl radicals inside of a very small radius of your induct device.
Okay. All right.
So you're saying there's byproducts from the catalyst that are going to actually make it into the living space, Colby. And there's been articles that read that, playing devil's advocate here. So there's articles that say, you have hydroxy radicals or OH, these radicals, they steal hydrogen from organic molecules. And these molecules, that you have these empty organic molecules that want to react with other things, right? And so it runs into an issue where you're playing with crazy chemical reactions, right? Do we have, how can we prove if these byproducts are going to be safe? What's to keep these byproducts from becoming in your lungs instead of the surface? And how dangerous is that going to be in my house?
Well, let me get back to the hydroxyl radical creation versus the ozone creation, because we still haven't said why you might want to have that ozone creation. We're going to come back to this again, I promise you. But I didn't want to just gloss over why would you get the ozone, because because I've got the one that creates ozone and I like it because ozone's going to go through and it's going to get you a much better travel time to be able to go through and help deodorize these larger molecules quicker for you. That's the primary thing that I have with those. I also enjoy technically the smell for it. I mean, it smells nice.
It gives off like a almost a bleachy smell, or like a kind of clean house smell, sort of thing.
Yeah, and going through the military, the only way that anybody ever thought something was clean was if it smelled like bleach.
Right, absolutely. So what about formaldehyde? I mean, that was part of the original question. Like that's a
byproduct I'm concerned with. Like if we have formaldehyde as a byproduct, how is that safe?
So the thing is that the formaldehyde can become a byproduct if you're, and this is all going to depend on the type of photocatalytic coating that you have on that UV light. So a lot of times they'll have these tiny nanomolecules of titanium dioxide. And I'm mainly speaking of the ones for the air scrubber for this, because that's the one that I've been able to get the most research for, because that's been able the one that I've got in my house. So that's the one that's the most important to me. Mm-hmm. But it will go through, and as long as you're going through a good servicing for it, as long as you're going to go through and change out that bulb on a regular basis. I don't mean a regular basis like every 3 months you have to buy another $200 bulb. I'm saying that you should go through and be able to replace this every 1 to 2 years. I noticed that mine was out whenever we started having this discussion, just strictly because of I walked into my house and I was just like, it's been a while since I've smelled like the litter box and my dog. And
now you're picking it up.
And it's just like, my wife's eyes have been a little watery. Like she's been sneezing a little more. I can't breathe out of this nostril most of the time, or it switches over. And it was like, oh, so I went up there and I saw that because that photocatalyst, the light Once it gets to a point, it'll somewhat just shut itself off.
Okay.
Because I went up there and I've got the power plugged in and everything else for it, but my indicator was showing me that it was off. So I unplugged it, plugged it back in. It took me about 30 seconds and it shut back off again. So I'm assuming it does have a safety feature that was built into it, that it's just not going through, but it's reached the end of its life cycle for it. So I need to get that thing replaced.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I can go through and start breathing again, having, my fruit last a little bit longer on the, out in the kitchen.
So it's safe. I mean, so that the formaldehyde and the ozone is safe. I mean, how do we know that the formaldehyde part of it?
Yeah. So the formaldehyde is whenever you have that actual coating for it. Whenever the catalysts for that and the little nucleation points for that get filled up, or you don't have a long enough dwell time for it, then as it moves toluene across it, it's going to partially break down, and it's going to form a formaldehyde, a benzyl alcohol, and a couple of different things.
Okay.
If it does not have this place for it to have proper dwell time for. And because of how the air scrubber is set up, it is set up so that it has a very laminar flow across it. So it doesn't just go through and have it to where just turbulent air can come through, just like touch it for a second and then be off of it. Mm-hmm. It actually has a fair amount of dwell time that it goes through and reacts with it. And then once again, like whenever it seems like it was starting to have an issue, starting to fill up, it kind of, I say fill up, it's not going to recognize that it fills up, but it's going to go through and it's going to wind up shutting itself off whenever it's time to change that bulb. So in regular, whenever it's actually working and working properly, it will actually decrease the formaldehyde inside of your house. Let's see. Okay.
So this product here, so if it doesn't spend enough time on the product, then it can create formaldehyde? Is that what you're saying?
If it doesn't spend enough time on it and there is not enough of that catalytic surface for it to adhere to, then it will go through and wind up creating that.
Okay. And so what happens if like it's at the end of its cycle? Is that, I'm wondering if that is how it decides when to shut off, when it becomes to where it could be unsafe. And could one potentially run long enough to where it becomes toxic?
It's a great part to go through. So the thing we're going to talk about with the toxicity of formaldehyde now, just because we're saying that you get formaldehyde, it's dangerous. It's the end of the world. Everybody's dead. Mm-hmm. Nothing is going to be that bad for you. Don't get me wrong. Formaldehyde's not good for you. Nobody's ever going to say, hey, you need more formaldehyde in your life. But you can go through and start off by, so look through all that real quick.
I've read recently, Colby, that like formaldehyde is in soap and laundry detergent. So I found that kind of interesting that we have some formaldehyde in our basic home products that we use every day. But is that formaldehyde in a liquid state, so you don't quite have to worry as bad as it could be in a gaseous state? Or, I feel like...
Well, what if your mom makes you eat your soap because you said a bad word?
Yeah. So most of my studies have been on the actual the gaseous version, as far as like the inhalation properties of the formaldehyde, formic acid, things like that. So we're looking at about 0.1 parts per million. You're getting into people that can go through and start to have irritated eyes. At about 0.75, that's what 0.75 parts per million, they consider that to be permissible. And at 0.016 is what they recommend.
And who is that, Colby, that gives you those recommendations?
From the NISTHA people, the Wikipedia says it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You can always trust Wikipedia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, but also one of the good things about formaldehyde is that it has a very pungent odor. And you can begin to smell that, but at concentrations of 0.5 to 1 part per million. So as soon as you start to smell it, then you're going to start to be inside of that zone. Now, whenever you have danger levels, and this is not levels where it's, it's lethal doses. This is just whenever you need to have issues and you need to stop and you need to get whatever it is resolved, is at 20 parts per million.
Oh, okay.
So that's at over 20 times the concentration that a regular person should be able to smell it.
And
So
is
once
that
you smell it and you smell it, you get it dealt with. Like
at 20 parts per million? You're saying that's when it becomes a health risk, and is that going to happen with any of this technology in the air conditioner?
if you have somebody that goes through and does it, and it doesn't have the nice laminar flow tubing to it, if it doesn't have a high purity concentration of the titanium dioxide, if it doesn't have a proper coating of the titanium dioxide to where it can kind of go through and just touch on it and get off of it. I mean, there's been studies showing that with these photocatalytic, with the PCOs, that sometimes you can have 3 times the formaldehyde output that it was going in at. So, and that's just going to continue to go ahead and expound upon itself.
Yeah, the more cycles it does.
I got a question for Colby Tersh.
Okay.
Let's say my house. I want to put an air scrubber in my house right now. I have an inside dog, okay, and I smell my dog, but I have fresh air. I've ran a manual JD&S, and why isn't that good enough? Why can't I just bring in outside air and it take care of everything? Am I gonna, like, if I'm, is it possible for me to smell my dog hair, or dander, with fresh air ventilation being my solution? Because there's a lot of people out there that says fresh air dilution is the solution. And, it sounds to me like you're saying, yeah, that's a good thing, but this is just as good, better. It's an effort to it. Like, what would you tell somebody that said, you're basically saying this is snake oil and fresh air dilution is the only way to go?
Fresh air is great if it's fresh air. And I don't mean fresh air as in just air from the outside. I mean fresh air as in you are in a place that has good quality air. If you're in a 5-mile radius of certain plants that are close by here, your fresh air may just be quote unquote fresh air and not fresh air. So it would still be nice to be able to go through and bring some of that in, just so you have that positive indoor pressure. And so it'll go through, and then the amount of chemicals that you do build up in your house will kind of be pushed out of there. It's good to get that extra bit of dilution to it, but it would be like if you went through and you had, you've got bleach in your tub. Just run a whole bunch of water in it, and now the bleach is less harmful. But what if you just put a spoonful of this in there, and then the bleach got turned into just regular salt? Like, you can do both. You can do anything.
How does that happen? For people who don't understand the chemical properties of bleach, what did you just say?
So, just going through and just saying that you can dilute something to the point where it is outside of your parts per million.
Mm-hmm.
That is 100% true. Or you can also go through and remove those things so it is below the acceptable rates of the parts per million. Either one of those is going to work for you. It's very difficult inside of. All right, we'll get back to your dog part for this. All right, so if you're wanting to get rid of the smell of your dog, then this will get rid of the smell of your dog in your house. Now, don't get me wrong. If you go and put your nose on your dog, you're going to smell it. It's not destroying your sense of smell or anything like that. Like, I cooked clams inside of my house right after I got done putting it in. And I was just like, let's see how this works out. Because I heard that it's supposed to eliminate all odor. No, I could smell clams. I could smell clams a lot. It is a distinct, it is a pungent aroma. But after I woke up the next day, I didn't smell clams.
So how much of this is kind of it's a 2-part question: placebo effect, but also our sense of smell, our nose and our nostril is very smart. It's very intelligent, and it's helpful for us, but it's not helpful for other people. If we stink, we can't smell ourselves because our nose has become used to that smell. And how do you measure smell? Like, what device out there can measure that smells good and that smells bad?
I would say that your nose is the perfect device to be able to go through and tell what smells good and what smells bad.
Right.
Because I gotta let you know, I grew up a little bit in Bogalusa as a kid.
What's Bogalusa?
Bogalusa is in Washington Parish, Louisiana, and the only thing inside of that town was Glenn's Po' Boys and a paper mill, and you could, as soon as you got within about 5 miles of Bogalusa, that paper mill smell just punches you in the mouth.
Right.
But I kind of grew up in that. So whenever I got close, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm getting close to being home. This is a wonderful smell to me.
Right. But once you're there for a little while, your body gets used to it, right? So you don't notice the same smell.
Yeah, it'll definitely go away on you just because you get that nose blindness.
Yeah.
So
can that happen with this system? Can that happen? Like, can you become nose blind to some smells because and mentally you're like, I don't smell it anymore because we just spent a couple hundred or $1,000 or $1,500 on getting indoor air quality, stuff put in.
Yeah, so you will partially get to the point where you might get a little bit nose blind to the smell of ozone if you get the one that creates ozone or not.
Yeah.
But as far as everything else, you're now in a state of like an absence. You're in almost an isolation chamber of smells. So whenever you step outside, you're like, whoa, like those flowers are really in bloom. Like this is really like a strong scent. Like your perfume smells wonderful.
Okay.
But it's you're being a little bit of an isolation chamber because that ozone will be the ozone and the other particles that are created from there will go through and help destroy those aromatic rings, and it'll be able to cut down on those. Now it will do the aromatic rings. So that's whenever a lot of the smell's from. So if you have formaldehyde in the air, this will not kill that smell. So that's important to know, is that you're not going to have the ozone that's going to wind up going through and create and being able to destroy this scent for that. Like you pick up on the formaldehyde chemical composition of it. It's not because it's an aromatic ring, which ozone will destroy.
Uh-huh. So until the formaldehyde is destroyed, you'll still smell it.
Yeah, regardless of what sort of now, if you go through and you have a whole bunch of aerosol cans that are going through and spraying these false scents,
yeah,
then you may wind up not being able to notice that.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things, again, with having these creators, that you shouldn't really be needing to go through and put all fragrances into your air now.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, a lot of those fragrances that you're putting off into there is going to be in the form of these aromatic, these rings that'll get broken down to like toluene that can form the actual formaldehyde.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Wow. Good to know. So we only have time for one more question. Do you want to ask it, Chris, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to, let me pick out my best one. I think to conclude, like with everybody's big concern is byproducts, and I hate to beat that dead horse, but I feel like that is where the snake oil conversation keeps coming from, right? They're scared of it. I don't. After what we've talked about, I would say we've kind of proven that the technology works, but it's the fear of what it does if it doesn't work properly.
So are there products out there that are inferior? Like somebody could generate a product that is crap product, and we haven't even talked about positive and negative ions and that type of stuff, but there are cheap products out there that could create something that could potentially generate more harmful byproducts than it does good.
So I would say, whenever you're dealing with these PCOs and you're dealing with ozone generators, the biggest concern that you're going to have is finding don't try to get one off of Craigslist. If you have an in-room ozone generator, don't be inside of the room whenever it's going through and doing this. If it's inside of your ductwork, that's going to be way better, especially if it's going to have a small amount that's going to be able to go through and get generated. Get a reputable one. Like, I've done my research on the one for air scrubber. That's the reason that's been the one that I've bbeen going through and naming for this. I'm not going to get paid by them. They're not going to give me a replacement bulb. Well, maybe they will. Hopefully they will. But I want to.
So if what you're saying, Colby, we talked about this, and I found this interesting. And I thought this was an interesting statement. But you said too much of anything is a bad thing, right? So let's say it's not formaldehyde. It's just straight oxygen. If you were to fill a room with lots of oxygen, is that going to be harmful?
Well, yeah, as soon as you cross a certain threshold with oxygen, it just becomes toxic to the body for extended durations of time. But that's pretty much what every single thing is just making sure that, and this all goes into the point of also for like the whole solution to pollution is dilution. So if you can't eliminate it, then you should definitely dilute it. If you're worried about those things and you don't feel safe with going through and getting one of these PCOs, you don't feel safe with going through and getting any sort of ozone generator, then you should definitely be thinking about bringing in some fresh air, and bringing in some fresh air that you're going to have filtered, and filter it well, filter it good. I would love to be able to go through with everybody that comes in and bring them through a full home performance setup for it, and be able to go through, get everything the right size for it, bring in fresh air, have their filtrations up to what they need to be at. But honestly, most of our houses here in Louisiana are barely set up for a filter that's a MERV 8 style. And that's going to be barely enough area that you've got right there to be able to capture out just random dust and particles. That's not going to be enough to catch all the big stuff that the HEPA 13, that the MERV 13s and the HEPA filters are. Everybody right now is going to be slapping on these high quality filters onto their systems whenever they do not have the room for that. And that's going to just wind up going through freezing up coils during the time whenever they turn on their heat. It's going to get overheated. They're going to wind up getting cracked heat exchangers. Then they're going to get carbon monoxide leaks into their house for it because of those issues. I mean, every time that you're going through with these, if you're going from a MERV 8 to a let's say a MERV 13, you now have went through and increased it from less than a fifth of an inch of water column down to a half an inch of water column. That's almost all the static pressure that you can have available inside of most residential systems. So if you go through and you're going to go through, and every time that you double the size of your filter, then that's whenever you can go through and cut this down in half. So you're going to have what? I
just got to get this out, man, before Tersh cuts us off. So a big question that was asked, and I thought it was very interesting, is if the byproducts do get released and they get into the house, and let's say they land on the surfaces, what's to stop them from making a U-turn and coming into your lungs? And if the parts per million is in check because the device is safe, and the parts per million is small, but let's say just one part per billion of formaldehyde hangs a left turn and goes in your throat, what are we dealing with there? Is that safe to somebody, or am I misspoken with what I'm trying to say there?
Well, that once again was what we were going through for the safe levels of it, was that whenever you cross over that 0.1 part per million, then that's whenever you get the irritated eyes. Like there's all the different ones that we've already listed out inside of here for the formaldehyde for it. But as far as some of the safety of just the ones, if you're worried about the ozone, this one is just from a study that I could find that was the most intensive study that I could see for long-term effects of having super saturated rooms with the hydroxyl radical generators that are going through that. And essentially, whenever you have the air scrubber with no ozone, it is a hydroxyl radical generator.
Colby, is it possible that we are these byproducts that it's creating, are we actually breathing in some of these byproducts currently outside of houses? Like, can we go outside and breathe these byproducts from something? Is it being created in other places? Like, Like if I walk outside right now and somebody's car is running and I'm standing 10 feet away, is it possible that I'm breathing in byproducts? And is it more dangerous than the 1 part per million formaldehyde in the house?
All right, so back onto the study that was going through with the hydroxyl radical generator. It was a 13-week long study of having there was 40 rats inside of a room, and they had this that pumped in well above the OSHA established levels of safe for hydrogen peroxide. Along with that was pumped in VOCs that were being brought in through here. All of that was going through for 13 weeks. It was at it was above the levels that are considered safe through OSHA, over 100 parts per million of the hydrogen peroxyl of the hydroxyl radicals going through there. And after 13 weeks of 24 hours a day of these rats going through that, after that, they went through and they dissected them. They also did individual checks throughout the time, but there was no discernible effects of that on those rats. It was 20 males, 20 females in this room with all that being pumped in, and then there was 10 males and 10 females in this room with nothing else being pumped in there. And they were the same when they cut them open after 13 weeks in rat weeks. Like it's a long time for them. They got a lot the entire time. So as far as I'm concerned, that's whenever they were able to go through and get a second, like it's classified as a medical 2 device. So now you can use hydroxyl radical generators inside of areas with people that are actually populated for that. It's been proven to be safe in there. They can do it inside of California. The air scrubber that doesn't do the ozone is safe in California. It actually reduces the levels of ozone that people are worried about for it. Like it's, as far as the safety is concerned, if you're worried about anything, it's going to be for having a good one. Make sure you do your regular maintenance to it. And that's going to be mostly it.
Did he answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to rewatch and decompose, But yeah, I mean, it's just I think people need to dig deeper, there's a lot of people who are, it's human nature, I think, that we tend to run from technology in a sense, I mean, years ago, I remember when this first the idea of all this started coming out, I was like, no way, no way. But I haven't dug at all. So is it a fair statement for me? And here's the way I look at it, Tersh. I tried to play devil's advocate, but I do kind of believe the science because Colby's kind of explained it to me over and over and over. Think about all the let me put this in perspective. You have, let's say, chemical engineers, biochemists, all these people, and they work hours and hours and hours and hours and many, many nights and days and weekends and probably spend their life trying to bring this technology to the world for the good. Mm-hmm. Who are we, I guess I should say, as technicians to say, snake oil? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're debunking years and years of people's hard work. How would I feel if I designed when I design a new construction home or a commercial building, I work with an engineer and we come up with a master plan. And then I take that plan to, my peers or something. And I say, hey, look at this. And they're like, I don't want to look at that. That's nowhere near right. But I've spent hours and days and weeks on it, just thinking that I just wanted to do something great. It would be a shock, right? Straight to the heart. And I feel like we owe it to the science community, people who are trying to do something good. Mm-hmm. Isn't it right that we should at least hear them all the way out before we make up our minds? And that was the whole point. Is like, look, if it's bad, it's bad. And let's find out if it's bad. And if it's bad, we don't do it. But right. Let's not say it's bad until we know everything as much as we can. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
Going along with that, I do think that, we do have a right to be able to go through and to look at these things and then to be able to second guess and question everybody else. Like if I'm the consumer for this, if I'm the technician, first of all, I'm going to be worried if I'm the consumer about my health, my children's health, the safety. Like that's my home. That's my safe spot. Like if I'm bringing something in here that's going to wind up pumping some chemicals in, like I want to know what those things are. Like I don't like to buy essential oils because I think that they're kind of just goofy. I mean, they smell great, but I don't care for them. And this all kind of goes into the whole thing of like, do you believe in this product? Because the placebo effect happens both ways. Whether
Good point.
Yeah. So if you're going through and you're thinking, man, I think I got, everybody's got that relatives like, I'm pretty sure I got, like the cancer in my neck. And it's like, what are you talking? You got the cancer in your neck? Well, I got an ache in here. And then all of a sudden that becomes the worst thing that they've ever had in their entire life. If you feel that if you put this inside of your house, that it's going to hurt you, if you put it in there, then it's not going to hurt you, but
you're going to hurt yourself.
You wind up having worse health because of it. If you go in there and you watch this and you see it and you believe it and you think of it and you actually believe in it, then put it in your house and go through, and then you will get extra added benefits from the placebo effect.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're saying is
it's real.
Kind of relates back to stress management, right? If you stress yourself out, you'll make yourself physically sick. If you're not stressed out, you will hopefully not be physically sick. But stress can definitely knock you down,
Yeah.
I mean, every owner could probably relate to that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Cool, guys. Well, thank y'all so much for coming on the show, and thank you for sharing knowledge, and everybody that's listening or watching this episode. Don't forget to check out the Facebook group because the things that we discussed here, it's just kind of scratching the surface of kind of what goes on in those groups, in that group. And I challenge you, if you find interest in this, you would find a lot of interest in that group. And it's the HVAC Grapevine on Facebook. Just request to join, and Chris or somebody, one of the admins will allow you to come in the group. But thank y'all again. Thank you, Colby and Chris, both for coming on the show. And until next time, you're listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast, and it's the podcast for service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners. Our goal with the podcast is to answer the unasked questions, and sometimes that unasked question is indoor air quality safe? And I hope that we helped you a little bit with this episode. If nothing else, more questions, the right questions to ask for the next time you have a conversation. But don't hesitate to reach out to me. Tersh, Tersh, at serviceemperor.com is my personal email address, or reach out to these guys. They're both in the Facebook group, and they'd be more than happy to explain as much as possible. And if nothing else, send you in the right direction so you can do some research yourself also. But until next time, I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon on the Service Business Mastery Podcast.